Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunniva O'Flynn and I work here in the Irish Film Institute, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here for this very special afternoon where we have Pat McCabe and Neil Jordan in conversation. I shouldn't be surprised to see so many of you turning out despite it being the first beautiful day of the summer. I'm not surprised because it is Neil Jordan and Pat McCabe. We've been absolutely delighted to host this retrospective over the past number of weeks. We've screened films, many of which have come from the Irish Film Archive, films which are part of Neil Jordan's own collection, which he deposited with us over the years, and we're very pleased to preserve them here. Some of you may have noticed we've also hosted online on our website a gallery of images from the paper collection that Neil has deposited with us. So it's fascinating. You'll see storyboards from Interview with the Vampire, and you'll see correspondence with various stars that Neil would have been in communication with. So it's a really interesting insight into the background of the production, and we're very grateful to Neil for having been such a supporter of our work in the archive over many years. Today we have Neil in conversation with his longtime collaborator Pat McCabe. Here in the Irish Film Institute we like to match celebs with celebs. So as you know, Pat McCabe is himself a person of cultural note, and you might have noticed there is a film crew in the house, and they're here filming The Play Next Door, which actually is a documentary about Pat McCabe, not Neil Jordan. They'll be filming just bits and pieces through the afternoon. If anybody has any objections to being filmed, you can put a bag over your head or you can leave. But it's, I'm sure none of you have a record or aren't supposed to be here. So that's what that is. It's something that you'll see on RTE in the coming months, so you might look forward to seeing if you can see yourselves if you haven't put a bag over your head. Okay, well look, as I say, I'm delighted to have you all here. We'll be here for the conversation with Pat and Neil, and I understand that Pat will throw the conversation out to you so you can think of some very succinct and brilliant questions with which to interrogate Mr. Jordan at the end of his conversation with Pat. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the room Pat McCabe and Neil Jordan.
Hello. Let's see, can I sit down here? Huh?
Do you need that cushion? I don't expect you to.
It's okay. As long as it doesn't move. See what I have to do? Yeah. Take your time now. It's okay. There we go. Oh, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will I take away these? Are they
No.
annoying? Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see such a big crowd on a sunny day like that. Can you all hear me? Or do I have to lean over to that microphone? Is it clear enough? It's really great. It's a real honour actually to be sitting here. I've seen all that. I just went to see the last Neil Jordan movie that I haven't seen. Is called The Making of Excalibur. John Boorman movie made back in 1981, I think it was. But I'm not really kind of qualified to be sitting here interviewing Neil Jordan, and if I am qualified in any way, it's kind of more of as an avid fan. You know, I love the movies, and I've got an awful lot out of them over the years. So I'll try to be as formal as I can in a way, because there's so much ground to cover and there's so much to say about these films. I'm sure so many of you know and love them and would like to ask Neil specific personal questions. We give you plenty of time to do that later on. But just to begin, Neil Jordan was born in Sligo and has lived most of his life in Dublin. I'd say arguably the most creative and indomitable imagination to have emerged in Ireland since the days of Yeats and Joyce, I would contend, and indeed was recognised as such very early on by Sean O'Whalon in his introduction to Neil's first book, Stories Night in Tunisia. So it's an honour to host this retrospective of your movies here at the IFI, Neil.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
But the thing about it is, 17 movies and 3 seasons of a massive TV series where I wonder, can you one even think about beginning to start?
Uh-huh.
What about starting at the end? Would that be all right with you?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, we'll start at the end. Camille Paglia has written this. A classy genre of a vampire film follows a style I call psychological high Gothic. It begins in Coleridge's medieval Christabel and its descendants Poe's Laïja and James's Turn of the Screw. A good example is Daughters of Darkness, starring Delphine Seyrig as an elegant lesbian vampire. High Gothic is abstract and ceremonious. Evil has become world-weary, hierarchical glamour. There is no bestiality. The theme is eroticized Western power, the burden of history. And particularly the last phrase, do you think, could that be applied to Byzantium, your new movie coming out?
Who wrote that?
Camille Paglia.
About what?
Just about the notion he's combative, be aware.
Sorry.
She's talking about the notion of psychological high Gothic.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Now,
yeah.
about what I would suggest things like Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, okay.
Things like Byzantium.
Yeah.
Things like even Dream of a Beast. There's 3. Do you want a few more?
No, that's
all right.
good. That's good. Yeah. So what's the question?
Question is, do you think... Oh boy, you're going to be hobbling out a lot slower than you came in if you don't... But basically the question is, do you think any of that could be applied to Byzantium, or are you just going to say, I was just making a movie, it's got nothing to do with anything?
Oh no, all of it could be, yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah. Do you want me to go into Byzantium?
I would love to hear what you would have to say about Byzantium, but any of those, or even part of those.
Okay, well, Byzantium was written by Maura Buffini. She's a playwright, and she also wrote several movies. She wrote a version of Jane Eyre that came out, probably shown at the IFI a couple of years ago. And she wrote a movie called Tamara Drew, which was kind of an English rom-com-y thing, you know. And so she wrote this script. She wrote a play called A Vampire Story, which Stephen Woolley, my old producer, commissioned her to make into a movie. And they sent me the script, and it was quite startling actually, because it was parts of it were very theatrical, and parts of it were very familiar to me from the movies I'd made, you know. And I didn't know why that was, you know. I never even asked Maura. I know she had a great love for a movie I made years ago called The Company of Wolves, yeah. And she probably had some, you know, knowledge of Interview with the Vampire. But there was several things in it. It was about a young girl trying to tell her story, who'd been trying to tell this story for 200 years, yeah. Yeah. And her mother always refused to let anybody know what the story was because it put them in extreme danger. So on one level it was about storytelling. And I've made many movies that have been like that, you know, like, for example, The Company of Wolves, which is, you know, a young girl's dream, and it's a kind of a, you know, it's a little trawl through various grim fairy tales, you know.
Breakfast with Pluto's a bit like that.
Breakfast with Pluto's a bit like that. The End of the Affair is about a novelist writing a novel, actually, about a love affair that he had, you know. So, and The Miracle is The Miracle was based around Night in Tunisia, really, but it was about young kids explaining the world through fictions to themselves in Bray. And there's a movie that nobody saw, but maybe more had seen it, you know.
The Miracle was a beautiful little film. It's an awful shame that people haven't seen it, or it doesn't seem to be. Would you think there's any way we could get to see it again, or could it ever be re-released?
No, I don't. Would it be re-released? Not in these days. But did they show it not as part of the season? They did.
Yes, it is part of the season.
Yeah, it was. But anyway, so there was that in it, and there was also this, what Camille Paglia would call high Gothic thing going on, you know. And I find that thing incredibly attractive. I never can work out why, you know. And I like the absolutely unrealistic approach to character and to drama and to situations. You know?
But your own literature, your written work is full of it. I mean,
Perhaps,
mistaken, the Bram Stoker stuff, all the vampire stuff that's in there. Do you think it's got anything to do with perhaps your reading as a young boy? You know, the fact that you read a lot of Stoker and Le Fanu and all those people, or the fact you lived near his house?
The fact that I live near his house, definitely, yeah.
I think that's got something to do with it, because you keep mentioning it in Mistaken.
Yeah, there was, but also what Maura had done was she went back to apparently Lord Byron, Alfred Lord Byron, was it? Alfred?
I don't know what his first name was.
Somebody Lord Byron, anyway.
Somebody Lord
That's
Byron.
the guy who wrote Don Juan and all those great poems and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, he wrote a fragment of a vampire story where he had a character called Darvel. Yeah, he was a midshipman or an officer or something. And his I'm going to really bore you to tears now with this, okay? Because his physician was a man called Polidori, yeah, who wrote one of the first finished vampire stories in English literature. I think it's called Vampire or something like that. And he had a character called Riven, an evil, dastardly officer. And so Maura had references to this Byronic kind of thing, which predates Bram Stoker and everything we know, we've come to imagine about vampires. And it was incredibly interesting, you know, and it was incredibly dynamic. And she also had this, what I'd call this neo-feminist Gothic thing going on, you know. The basic story is about a mother and daughter who, through the accident of their vampirism, are so close in age that they pretend to be sisters, you know. And the mother was a whore, a prostitute, a working girl, you know. And she exulted in this power that she had over life and death and over men in particular. And the daughter was a shy, retiring girl who just wanted to finish her schooling. And every time you get the feeling every time they settled in any place, the mother would set up a brothel upstairs and the girl could never get to finish her lessons, you know. So dreadful things would happen and they'd move on. And it was really, and it was the kind of, it was a kind of a feminist approach to a vampire nexus of things, and it was the kind of thing that you wouldn't have read in this. I mean, the only equivalent I can think of actually is Angela Carter in a way.
I was just going to ask you about that, because Angela Carter was highly politicised. She was a feminist, and she's actually her name keeps appearing now recently again. I noticed that she's become very popular again. Yeah. What was your working relationship with her like? Did you approach her with her stories were very popular in the 70s? Yeah. Did you approach her?
She approached me in Dublin. Yeah. She was at they had it for the centenary of the birth of James Joyce.
Yeah.
Yeah, they invited all these writers from all over the world here. Among them were Dennis Potter and George Louis Borges, actually, and Anthony Burgess and Angela Carter. And Angela had written she'd adapted a little short story of hers called The Company of Wolves into a radio play, and she showed it to me and asked me could it be made into a film, and it was too short to be made into a film. So I read her collection of stories, which was at the time called The Bloody Chamber, and they were all various versions of
fairy tales.
Yeah. And I said, Angela, if we can find a portmanteau kind of structure where we start with a realistic situation, and within that situation somebody tells a story, or somebody has a dream of a story, and within that story somebody else tells a story. Maybe we'll find a way to incorporate all of your versions of fairy tales into one little movie. And she was interested in that idea, so we sat down in her play at Traveller to London, you know, and we just let our imagination.
And she hadn't written a movie before that, had she? Had she ever?
No.
So was it difficult to knock a script out of that work?
No, it was brilliant. She was amazing.
Was it?
Yeah. We'd just sit down in the morning, have a cup of tea, and we'd just work out 2 scenes, one for her to write, one for me to write. I'd go off, I'd write mine, she'd write hers. Come back the next day, I'd read hers, she'd read mine. We'd say, okay, let's move on from here, let's do the next bit.
And how long did all that take?
About 2 weeks, yeah. 3 or 4 weeks, maybe.
I'm doing something wrong here.
What? No. Well, it was. Anyway, one was young and one was adventurous. But anyway, the thing is that it's in Maura's version of these eternal kind of women. I mean, they were savage and brutal and sexual and bloody, and they were all of those things. You know, I mean, it was a kind of a feminism that I wasn't used to from somebody who grew up in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? It's more knowing and more empowering and more kind of interesting about, you know, its portrayal of these 2 particular women. So that was great. I'm going back to now Byzantium. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Yes.
And so that was great. And so all those things attracted me to it. And I don't know why I made one vampire movie called Interview with the Vampire. And I made that because basically the book was so haunting. I found the book quite haunting. And the book seemed to me to be about guilt, you know, pure and simple. Kind of Catholic guilt in a way, you know. And similarly with Maura's script, there were so many elements that were so interesting, even if these characters had not been vampires, you know what I mean? And so that's why I made I decided to make a second vampire film. I mean, I've no particular obsession with vampires or with. I do like creatures. I do like imaginary creatures of all kinds. You know what I mean? And the only two left in popular culture seem to be vampires and zombies. You know, but it's a pity there's not more. You know, if you could invent.
Well, the fellow you had in Dream of a Beast was good.
He was good, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't know what he was though. I mean,
he didn't know what he was.
No, he was like, I don't know about beasts and stuff and vampires because I mean, in Vladimir Nabokov says that fella in Franz Kafka's book is not a beetle at all; he's a cockroach, or the other way around. I don't know. So I mean, does it matter? Can you just make up any old?
I suppose you can, you know, I suppose you can. I mean, but the thing is that I suppose they have to belong to popular culture, don't they, you know? I mean, there is something about the undead that makes us think about death and life and, you know, is it, you know, would it be horrible or monstrous or wonderful to live beyond your natural
Well, you play around because they don't bite anybody. They actually stick an elongated nail into the person's neck.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to see the face.
It's because I think... I mean, you've seen a lot of the Hammer movies, haven't you?
And that's one of the reasons why I really love this movie, because when I met you first, I said, oh, I just love these Dracula films and, you know, The Reptile and all those movies. And you said, no, they're stupid. Didn't you? You said, you did. You said that they're not, they're badly made and they're shoddy. The next thing, Byzantium, although it's much better than any of those movies, it still has a poetic trash element to it.
Yeah, okay.
I know, I don't mean that.
The truth is, I said that because I'd never watched those movies.
Well, you knew about them because when I mentioned a few of them, you said that's no good and this is no good.
Okay.
But the thing is, I'm not being at all pejorative when I say that there's a poetic trash element to it. Obviously, it's a very poetic film. It's beautifully made. The hotel that just comes out of nowhere, this extraordinary vista, it's just beautiful. It's one of the finest things I've seen in cinema in years. And the waterfalls of blood. But they are trashy, kind of. You know.
Well, when you say trashy, you mean they're Grand Guignol?
Absolutely Grand Guignol.
Yeah,
totally Grand Guignol.
Well, say that. Don't say trash, man. Grand Guignol is a much more interesting word, isn't it?
Well, Grand Guignol is much more swanky, but it's still trash, Neil.
Okay.
All right, anyway, I wanted to go back to the beginning once, which I wanted to ask you, right, you grew up in Clontarf, didn't you?
Yeah.
So,
Dollymount.
North Dublin then.
Yeah.
And what kind of a kid do you reckon, or how do you perceive yourself as a kid? What would you have seen yourself as in those days?
Just a dreamy kid, you know, who did very badly at school.
Did you?
Yeah. Because my father was the Kigra, you know. Kigra being the inspector.
Absolutely.
Who comes down to the class. And I went to school in Belgrove College, and John McGahern taught me, actually. You know, and he mysteriously vanished one day.
Never seen again.
Where's he gone?
Yeah.
Where's that strange
off writing
man
dirty
gone?
books, wasn't he? He's gone off to write another dirty book.
I didn't know about that, but anyway. But so my father was a school inspector, and John McGahern used to say, because my father taught John McGahern in St. Pat's, and he also taught you, didn't he?
He did, yes.
And McGahern used to say I was the living refutation of all his educational theories. But so it was kind of tough growing up in a highly educated household when you performed very badly at basic maths and stuff like that, you know. But anyway, we grew up by St. Anne's Estate, and you know, it was a kind of growing up in the 50s kind of business, you know.
But you were a very bookish lad, would you say?
Yeah, I was bookish. Yeah, I used to read a lot.
What would you have read, like the standard Biggles and Peanut Blyton, or would it?
Well, I read everything that P.G. Wodehouse wrote, all 104 books. Yeah.
104 books.
I remember feeling of immense kind of sadness, realising that there was no more to read.
God, you were a bookish boy, weren't you? A feeling of immense sadness. This was before you got to the age of 7, was it?
No, I was about 12.
An immense sadness overwhelmed me.
There was no more to get because I used to go to the library. And he wrote so many of them. You know, all those Blandings Castle and all that stuff.
Oh, right.
He was actually quite a good writer, that man. Jeez. In fact, Anne Rice wrote a book called The Tale of the Body Thief, yeah? It's one of the Lestat series of books, yeah? And I swear that is based on a short story by P.G. Wodehouse, where Bertie Wooster goes to he goes to a dentist, you know, and they both have to go into the gas, yeah. And the annoying little kid, like a little Lord Fauntleroy kid from Los Angeles, something like that, and they switch bodies when they come out. Bertie Wooster's in this guy's body, and this guy's in Bertie Wooster's body.
Was the link ever made? Was it ever?
No, I know. But it's actually a wonderful little story.
She wasn't too pleased about an interview with the vampire when
She was. She liked it. She loves it.
I know at the end she did, but
Yeah,
she took out a big ad in Hollywood Reporter or something saying this is a travesty.
Well, that's because it cost Tom Cruise, you know.
But that turned out to be a triumph, didn't it?
He's a great actor, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
A really good actor, you know. But that was a big public thing, you know. The book was incredibly. It was like at the time the book was as popular as Dan Brown's, you know, The Da Vinci Code or something. You know?
Yeah.
Everybody had an idea of what this extraordinary character Lestat should be, and you know. And when I cast Tom Cruise, because the person that Brad and David Geffen wanted was Daniel Day-Lewis, you know. And I remember saying to him, Daniel will never play this. And when he decided he didn't want to play it, you know, I met Tom, and he was really interested in it. And anyway, Anne changed her mind when she saw the film. And she
Interview with Vampires, Byzantium, a kind of female version of that, do you think?
A little bit, yeah.
It's a link anyway, isn't there?
Definitely. You've got one character who exults in their power and is a, you know, kind of a sadomasochist.
Well, there is that, yeah.
And the other character is just riddled with guilt and passivity through the entire. I mean, Brad found it very difficult to play that part, actually. You know, being sad for 6 months. Yeah. He didn't like it at all.
Yeah, God, that was a great movie. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Now, just hopping around a little bit here, Neil, but you know, recently read your book, Mistaken. Now, what I really loved about Mistaken was it's a kind of a Dublin that I haven't seen in fiction before.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is it's a Dublin of beat clubs and kind of the architecture even of the new housing estates.
Yeah.
The days when the original Crying Game by Dave Barry would have been playing, it's a kind of a missing Dublin or something, and it's a love letter almost to the city.
Yeah, well, it's the one I remember.
But it's
You know.
it's kind of extraordinary, and I was kind of taken aback by the fondness that I found in it for the city.
Yeah.
So, do you see it as a kind of a Dublin book?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, the city was a very beautiful place then, in this, you know, in the 50s, 60s, because it hadn't changed since the 1920s, you know, and until they began to, you know, progressively ruin the place, you know. They've almost succeeded, haven't they? But it was and it was also very, it was kind of I don't know. I think my parents used to let me run wild, you know. I mean, I just used to go every weekend. I'd go to, when I'd finish school, you know, I'd go to one club and to another, always trying to listen to this weird music and stuff. And I'd spend my entire weekend, you know, 48 hours of it in strange, strobe-lit neon places, you know. And I was wondering, did I imagine this or did I make it up? So I had to go on the internet and find out if these places exist, and they did. And there was really cool places, you know. You know, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, like the Green Dolphin Club and these kind of places.
All that stuff, yeah. I was a mod, you see. You know, if you could afford a Honda 50, you affected the mod style. You know, if you could afford a different kind of motorbike and leathers, you affected the rocker style, that kind of thing. And so I used to wear a park mohair suit and stuff, and you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, it was. But I suppose everybody's memories of childhood is rose tinted. But I think it was and I think it still is a very beautiful city physically, you know. And but it was incredibly special then, I think, you know, because all the Georgia stuff was still there, you know.
Well, you never see that Dublin in movies though, except documentaries maybe.
Perhaps not. No.
Occasionally.
No, but I don't think people write about the real world anyway, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read, what novels have been written? If I suppose Strumpet City is a period that James Plunkett didn't remember, isn't it? Or did he remember that? Did he?
But he remembers through his father and his grandfather. It wouldn't have been his direct experience, no.
But if you read Behan's short stories and stuff like that, you do get a sense of a real city.
You certainly do, yeah. But it's not the city that we're talking about here. You know, the city of the sort of prosperity of Dun O'Malley and so
Yeah.
on. That's the world that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah.
the Behan story still has the decrepitude about it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of talk about pawnbrokers and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
Mistaken it is the beginning of modern Ireland.
Well, as a place, it could have been like Liverpool, really, is in a way, you know.
Yeah, I suppose
But it
so.
was still very divided. I mean, what always was confusing, I grew up in Clontarf and went to St. Paul's, Raheny, yeah, which is kind of a middle-class school, yeah. So I had a middle-class existence, but the minute you crossed the river and went to the south side, people assumed you were,
Get sticks for the fire or something.
yeah, they assumed that you came from a family of 17, all of them worked at a docks or something, and they wouldn't let you into places.
Sure,
And you'd be totally confused. You say, excuse me, sir,
Yeah, from
I'm
a
as respectable as you
solidly
are.
middle-class household, yeah.
kind of thing. But it was that weird division. And a mistake, and I kind of wanted to write about that. Who was it said that there's a class system in Ireland, but nobody can explain what it is?
Nobody can tell you what they don't know what it is, yeah.
But the strange difference between that kind of the kid who grows up in Palmerston Park, you know, and the kid who grows up in Marino, you know, that kind of thing, and the strange difference between a kid who goes to a Christian Brothers school and a kid who goes to Gonzaga, for example, or Belvedere or something like that, you know, that kind of thing. And they, you know, it's more, in many ways it's more interesting to examine those tiny little divisions than, you know, the difference between a working class and middle class kind of background.
Yeah, because it wasn't that broad, it was far more subtle than that. It was really interesting.
And because I came from a middle class.
Yes,
background,
yeah. No, it's a truly lovely piece of work. So you'd never make a movie of that, though, I don't suppose. Although there was talk of it, wasn't there?
Somebody wanted to buy the rights to it, yeah, they did when it came out. But I would if I could, but I'd have to, it's finished in a way, you know. You know what I mean? I mean, the thing is that I do remember, the reason that the Bram Stoker business is in there, because the first vampire film I saw was in a Scouts Hall, somewhere around Marino or something like that, you know, where the screen was a piece of sheet, you know, tied up.
Why do you remember that so vividly, don't you?
You do, yeah. Well, I remember the sound of, I don't know which, it must have been one of the Bela Lugosi ones. So that this gentleman in a cape, you know,
Yes.
and a bat would fly through London, you know. And there would be these hummings of this bat's wings, you know, and the bat would come up to, it must have been Nina's bedroom or something, and just be kind of flapping around the outside of the window, and suddenly then this man would be in her bedroom, you know. And I must have seen it at a very impressionable age, because it terrified the life out of me, particularly the sound terrified the life out of me, you know. And every time I had to, because the cinema we used to go to was the Fairview, and to get to it you had to go past Bram Stoker's house.
Oh, I see what's coming now, yeah.
No, you had to,
You were
seriously.
literally terrified to go past
you
this
go on your
house.
bike past this house, oh my god, you know, then you can just sleep in and see a strange movie. I was afraid to walk, because we used to go into town as kids and we'd always end up walking home, you know, and I was afraid to walk past that little crescent of houses, yeah, because, and I'd imagine I'd hear this sound, you know. So.
And you know, I suggested recently that maybe you should buy that house because it's up for sale. Is that one of the reasons why, that you're a bit afraid to buy it?
Probably terrified.
I think it is.
I mean, Stoker was a very strange man, wasn't he? You know, he was like a stalwart, cricket-playing, you know, upper middle class kind of ascendancy guy, wasn't he? You know, and he spent his whole life working for Sir Henry Irving, didn't he?
Well, he's a big heavy fella, but next thing you know, he's hurling himself at Henry Irving's feet, saying, "Oh, I love you, I can't live without you, Henry." No, what sort of carrying on
Take
is
me to
that?
London, let me be your slave forever.
That's no way to behave for the young writer, is it? Well, anyway, that's Mistaken, which is a really great book. I mean, if people are interested in Irish literature, I really think you should read that book. It's a great book about Dublin, I think. But there's a great article on Byzantium in Sight and Sound magazine, and Neil's quoted in it. Neil, it said, just getting back to your early days as a writer, you quoted in it and you say, in the 70s, and it's a period I remember myself, the path of someone attracted to writing was pretty clear. You'd publish a book, short stories, you get some awards, you travel the literary circuit and build up your reputation as a man of letters. And by the time The Past, which was your second novel, came out, you say that you realised you were already obsessed by visual description, and that maybe the way to explore things was not through literature or language at all, it was through film.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Do you think
Yeah.
that's true, or I mean, the first book was really successful, and the past was highly regarded. I remember coming across it in New Writers in Writing, published by John Calder. Isn't that right? That was a very prestigious place to find work at that time. And that you said you jumped ship and went.
Well, no, I didn't jump ship. No, the thing was that if you grow up, say as an Irish writer, I think it affects everybody who writes. Whether they're male or female, or whether they're in the 70s or now. I mean, if you grew up in Dublin, it has been so exhaustively examined and kind of imagined by James Joyce, and every place you travel, move in Dublin, Joyce seems to have sucked it dry with
He's covered already, yeah.
his imagination and stuff like that. And I grew up in Sligo, or I was born in Sligo, in Ross's Point. And if you ever troll around the Yeats country, you know what I mean, you see how kind of completely Yeats mythologized that kind of landscape.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that you're laboring under these huge bat's wings of these people, these guys, like mainly Yeats and Joyce, And when I first wrote a movie, I felt this tremendous freedom because there was none of this history. There was none of this history to it. There was no precedent to it. There was nobody to satisfy. There was nobody to aspire to. There was, it was like virgin territory, and I felt tremendous freedom in doing that. And I just wrote a script, and I began to write some things for television, and I thought this really entrances me, you know what I mean?
But you must have had other qualities and skills that might not necessarily have been, there for other people. I mean, it takes money to make a movie. You've got to go to meet people. You've got to pitch stories. How did you get around all that stuff? Was it because Channel 4 was there, maybe?
Yeah, no, it was just by accident. Because John Borman asked me to, because he read 1980. Oh no, I know what it was. I wrote a script called Travellers about young travelling. An arranged marriage between two young people who knew nothing about sex. They were too young to know about it. And he read it, and he read Tunisia, and he asked me to come out to work with him on a screenplay at Ardmore Studios. And he had bought the rights to this book, a strange little French book called John O'Flaherty's Travels, kind of weird imagination of Ireland. And we wrote this script, which John is still trying to make. We called it Broken Dreams. And I sat with John Borman and, began to write and began to think, got the feeling, okay, this again is virgin territory, you know what I mean? Your imagination can go free, you can have bogs exploding with geysers and you can have whatever.
Yeah, I know.
And, what's that?
Just your stick, it's all right.
Oh, yeah, okay. And so I thought, this is something I'd really like to do. So then I wrote a script. I said, okay, I'm just going to write a script that's not based on anything. And I wrote Angel, the script for Angel, yeah. And I realized with the experience over the first movie I made, which was made into a film, that it bore no relationship to what I'd written. I said, if I really want to take this seriously, I want to do it myself. I want to learn to direct it myself. And I'd written. Then John had asked me to go through the last draft of Excalibur with him, which I did. And he wanted me around when he was shooting the film, very kindly. I don't know why he did, but he did. I think he wanted someone to bounce ideas off.
Sure.
So I said, why don't I direct a documentary on you making the film? So he said, he got some money from the budget, about 25,000 or something like that. And I hired Seamus and Brendan Deasy to wander around the set and follow this great director doing this extraordinarily huge, Arthurian legend thing, And it was really interesting for me. I just found it absolutely fascinating, but I didn't have a clue as to how to make something, you know what I mean? But you knew when there was something arresting, where to point the camera, basically,
Yeah.
And I found it a really interesting experience. And then I wrote Angel. And
Angel, I remember really first thinking, this is extraordinary. What I loved about Angel when I saw it first was that it wasn't social realism.
Yeah.
I think that we'd become so kind of hidebound, both in fiction and in movies or whatever there were of them, by the kind of straitjacket of social realism, and that only tells 10% of the story anyway.
I know. Yeah.
And yet here was a movie that was a film noir with recognisable Irish landscapes. It was an abstraction of the thriller form, really. I mean, did you feel you had written something really special when you did it?
No, I felt I was writing something that I could not have written in literature. If you think, for example, like page 1 of Angel, 1 of the 2 chapters, 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 Bernard McGlaverty had written Cal,
Yes.
you know, and there were various pieces of fiction and stories. Probably your namesake had written Death and Nightingale, said he?
Not at that
Eugene
point, but he
McCabe,
would have
no.
written Cancer, he would have written Heritage and things like that.
things like that.
So there were solid realist pieces.
Yeah, and there were various responses to the troubles, let's call them, you know, in literature. And Seamus Heaney, the Northern poets, were doing all the
They
writing
were,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But I could, when I wrote Angel, I realised I couldn't have done this in fiction, you know what I mean? Because you can, and I don't quite know why, you're dealing with a received form, which is kind of a nihilistic thriller in a way. You're dealing with a certain form of myth making, you know what I mean? As you're writing it, you know, you're dealing with it's just something that was very refreshing, you know, and that I knew I couldn't have written a novel about it, for example, say, put it that
And
way.
it was rooted in the real as well in its way. You know, I remember hearing you in an interview way back, long before I got to meet you, was how you were describing one, I think you'd been with a band and you'd been in a psychiatric hospital at a dance. And you described how slowly, almost like ghostly, or almost spectrally, the various patients started to approach the stage, and you were talking about using that scene, but with Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. And I thought, this is the way to go. This is moving somewhere now that could get really, really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true, actually. But it's. I mean, if you do think of, I mean, the great thing about cinema is you can construct an image that can mean 20 different things at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the only great thing about cinema, you know. Maybe it's the only thing that's worthwhile. But also, when I wrote Angel, I was very clear in my mind that I wanted this to be about the barest existential facts of doing away with somebody's life, you know, whom in other circumstances you could have, you know, had some acquaintance with or something like that,
drank with or whatever.
That's why Stephen Ray's character kept asking everybody, "What's your name?" Now, and I didn't know much about making films at all, but I just knew that I could see the colours of it very clearly, and I could see that I wanted it to be almost shot like a musical, you know, which is a bit an odd thing, but it was about a show band, you know. So this idea of these colourful suits, these golden and pink suits, and against these blasted kind of landscapes, you know, and this blasted.
But that all came through, didn't it?
That all absolutely
worked. That all worked.
Yeah. And Chris Menges was the saxophone. But it was interesting directly because I hadn't a clue when I was making Angel. You know, I just knew I knew the bare bones of what I wanted to see, and I knew what I knew even more than that was what I didn't want to see, which was very interesting.
And what did you not want to see? What sort of things did you not want to see?
I didn't want to see any sociological kind of. I didn't want to see any agitprop.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see any kind of documentary justification for what he was doing, what Stephen Ray's character was doing, the kind of madness he was descending into. I didn't want to see British soldiers smashing up, beating around young guys with bad legs like my own in the street. Or, you know, I didn't want to see any
so
of
much of that at that time. There had been so much of that at that time.
No, it was not. It was more to do with the fact that I wanted the movie to actually be about the consequences of the almost existential attraction of nihilism, you know, of a gun, basically, you know, of a weapon. And I suppose all of those things, you end up making something that is naive but rather special in a way, you know. Anyway, that's what I did with Angel, you know. I remember when we finished it because John had said he would produce it, and he didn't have a lot of luck in finding money. And I sent it to Channel 4. They just opened up, and they read it. Walter Donoghue was there, and David Rose was the commissioning editor there, and Jeremy Isaacs ran the whole program. And they liked it tremendously, and they wanted to make it. And I went over to meet them, and I said, "Look, I'd like to direct this." And they were quite shocked. They said, "No, you can't do that. We wouldn't even think of that." And I said, "But look, I've got John Borman has agreed to produce it." And they went, "Oh, really?" I said. I went back to poor John and said,
"By the way, you're producing my first movie."
It was kind of happened a bit like that in a way.
Well,
do you understand what I mean?
And
they saw the documentary I'd made, and so we kind of were thrown into this, you know, this kind of charnel house of
And you knew Stephen Ray's work, presumably?
I'd seen Stephen on the theatre. I'd seen him in a Tom Murphy play. I really liked his style of acting.
Yes.
His total kind of spectral presence that he had.
Yes,
He's
right.
a great actor.
So internally, he's astonishing.
Yeah, and I kind of wrote it with him.
I remember seeing it around that time in Professional Foul by Tom Stoppard.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes,
I remember
I
being
do.
really
Yeah.
struck by the way he posed that.
Yeah.
And, anyway, I want to cover some of the other movies. Actually, before I go on to some of the other movies, Neil, there's things that always intrigue me, and I know I've had a laugh about this, but I remember hearing a radio play you did called Miracles of Miss Langan on Radio 4, and you had a relationship with BBC Radio 4 at that time. You'd done radio, don't you? But you kind of didn't have that much interest in stage drama. Why?
Because I was very bad at it.
Were you, though?
Terrible, yeah.
But Miracles of Miss Langan as a play was very good.
It was a radio play, yeah, I suppose.
Well, I mean, it's not that big of a difference.
No,
I mean,
I know, but I tried to write. I could never it was okay to get people on the stage, but I could never find the ways of getting them off. So the stage would become increasingly more crowded, you know. No, seriously, it was kind of an impossible space.
You couldn't get them off the stage.
Well, the kind of presumption, oh, I go out and make a cup of tea now, or oh, that's the phone, or whatever. I better answer.
Nah.
It didn't make theatre never made any sense to me. And Michael Colgan asked me to write a one-act play.
Yes.
You never saw that, did you?
Never did. No.
No, okay. You're lucky.
Why was it?
He asked Conor McPherson and me and Brian Friel, to write one-act plays. And Brian had written an adaptation of the Chekhov story "Lady with Lapdog," which is a beautiful piece of work.
Yes.
Conor wrote a really interesting, strange thing about 3 people that were wearing bags over their heads. And I wrote this play, this thing, which demanded a piano on stage,
Okay.
And Michael asked me to direct it, which I said I would, against my better instincts. And I just don't understand theatre. I don't understand the lighting in theatre. I tried to light the stage, and I'd walk over there, and the lights would look like one thing. I'd walk over there, they'd look like something else. I'd sit in the middle, and the image would look like... So I'm thinking of all the wrong things with regard to theatre. Do you understand what I mean? I'm thinking of an image, actually, and I'm thinking of an image that you can fix in your mind.
I'm still puzzled by it, though. I know.
I know. It'd be great to write theatre, but I can't, and I shouldn't.
Well, maybe you could draft in somebody to get the people off the stage. Just get him as a co-writer. So his job is he gets a cup of tea. He gets the messages.
Yeah, but you realise that the true playwright doesn't give a damn about that sort of stuff.
Probably not.
They just have people saying. The people are describing where they are or what the reality is, and you accept it in the audience. I just haven't got that kind of brain, I like plastic realities,
Yeah. Well, after the movies with Angela Carter and Excalibur, making of Excalibur and Angel and so on, you then went to Hollywood for a while. With We're No Angels and High Spirits. Do you have an opinion of any kind of Hollywood, one way or another?
Yeah, it's a grand place.
Yeah.
It was different then.
Why was it different then?
Oh God, it's very hard to describe really. It's because the language of a European filmmaker was one thing then, and the invitation to Hollywood always happened, and it was always regarded as a corruptible or a poisoned chalice in some way, you know what I mean? So, say Wim Wenders went there and he made that movie with Francis Coppola, didn't he? Hammett it was called.
Hammett, yeah.
Yeah, and Antonioni went there and made Zabriskie Point, and, a good friend, Amir Costa Rica, went there and made that rather Arizona Dream and stuff. Directors, auteurish directors would constantly think they can master the Hollywood machine, for their own purposes, and they'd end up making these odd things that would be recut by studios and nobody went to see them, So that seemed to be the rhythm then. But now it's different. Now every young English director that makes a low budget, kind of visceral thriller, just wants to direct Avengers 6 or something like that. Do you understand what I mean?
Of course,
they welcomed what you'd call the trash aspect of it, but it was a different thing then. But it was, they churned out movies then like nobody's business, they just made them. So the reason High Spirits came about was because with Palace, Stephen Woolley's company, we'd made Company Wolves, he'd released Angel, we made Company Wolves, which is a big hit for them there. We made Mona Lisa, which was an even bigger hit. And I sketched out this little idea for a story that I wanted to shoot in black and white, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was kind of like a necrophiliac comedy, you know.
Oh, charming.
Well, it would have been charming. It would have been charming if it would have been left at that, you know. But they were very anxious to get in to do big American movie. That was then, you know, they kept trying to get bigger and bigger.
Bigger stars and so on.
You know, so this thing changed into something different, and by the time Anton first was designing sets before we'd even cast it properly and stuff like that, so it became a bit of a mess. Let's put it that way.
Kids love that movie.
I know, and it should have been an interesting film. It should have been it should have been a bit like Whiskey Galore. Or something,
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Yeah.
I Married a Witch. It was
Yes,
Married a Witch,
yes,
yeah, it should
yes,
have been like
yes,
that, but
yeah.
it just became this big noisy mess, you know. And they appointed a Hollywood producer, made it a noisier mess. And,
Okay.
you know, it was inappropriately cast and all this sort of stuff. So it was a film that I kind of lost control of, you know, and I never actually saw my finished cut of the movie. You know?
Did you not?
No, because there were a load of effects in it, and they began previewing the movie when half it was still green screen, you know,
Oh, I see.
and changing it on audiences, you know, from audience responses and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a mess. And
Was
then-
We're No Angels a happy experience or not?
Yeah, I enjoyed doing
Yeah,
that.
both your
Yeah,
Hollywood
I did.
movies at that period.
I enjoyed that, but it was not my script, and it was, you know, again, I was kind of a director for hire in that, and there was a version of that movie which was not at all as broad as the one that came out, you know, where Robert De Niro's performance was not at all as broad as it was in.
It was very broad, wasn't it?
Oh, too much, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's, but I quite enjoyed it. And David Mamet's script was ironic and quite kind of interesting, you know. But I didn't want to continue in that mode, you know, because as a director if you're just purely a director in a Hollywood film, you know, your opinion is as valid as the cinematographers, the producers, or the actors. You know what I mean? If you haven't written material, it's there's no way of really making it your own, you know. So I came back and I made The Miracle. Then I wrote The Crying Game, and made The Crying Game.
So that must have been a difficult enough period financially with The Miracle and like trying to get The Crying Game off the ground. I mean, it's all very well saying, you know, I mean, if you're a writer, you can write anywhere. It costs nothing to write. But actually getting a movie up and running and, you know, to keep the creative juices or to even keep your interest going. I mean, you've got to be made of tough stuff to kind of, like The Miracle, it's a beautiful movie, but it perhaps didn't get the audience it deserved. And then you have to make the Crying Game. So you got to have some metal to do that.
Well, you got to have a, you know, you got to have a, you know, and creative need to do it. I think, you know, you got to have that. You know.
Was it hard to get The Crying Game off the ground?
Yeah, very hard. But I didn't have to do that. The producer Stephen Woolley did that. It was hard directing a movie where the money never came through, you know, and it was difficult. We hadn't got at all as much money as we needed, but it was, you know, it was. I mean, the problem is when you've got really minimal resources, everything ends up being. The difficult thing to do is to make a film that has any, where the images have any resonance. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, I suppose with the budget we had in The Crying Game, it would have been easy to make a social realist kind of fly on the wall kind of thing. But actually, I wanted it to have much more stature.
But initially, it was called The Soldier's Wife. It was kind of like the Guest of the Nation.
Yeah.
The Hostage, wasn't it a bit like that?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And then it flipped into something else?
Yeah.
When did that come about, or what?
Well, I'd written after I did Angel, I'd written a sketch of the story, and I began to write the first scene, and I basically wanted to make a film about somebody who's responsible for the death of a soldier, and then goes to meet their wife, you know, you know, without revealing who they are, and forms a relationship with their wife. And every time the story came to London, when my character met the soldier's wife, as it was called, it became something that somebody else would have done. It became a bit like Cal or something, or you know, the pity of it and weepy and stuff and all that. And it just lost interest for me. And then I thought one day, I said, what if I make this woman transvestite? It sounds insane, you know, totally insane. But if I make
Did you just wake up with the idea one morning, or what?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Just like
That's
that.
kind of fascinating the way sometimes that can happen with a story.
Well, it's weird because I'd written, I mean, the first 20 minutes of The Crying Game, I had written, you know, Stephen Ray and that encounter with Jody, the Black British soldier, and He has to look after him. He has to bring him to the toilet. It's almost like they're almost like a kind of a weird, perverse marriage or something.
Yes.
Because he's kidnapped the guy. And the minute I made the girl a guy, suddenly all of this strange kind of homoerotic overtones came to, or something about the relationship became much more pregnant with all sorts of meaning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so rather than it being like the first 20 minutes being a version of Guest of the Nation,
Yes.
it became like some kind of sexual kind of psychodrama or something like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Where Forrest Whitaker says, "Look, I gotta go to the toilet."
Yeah.
And he's handcuffed. And he says, "Well, you got to take it out, man. Come on, you can't do it," and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it began to be. It became something that it wasn't only about politics, but it was also about sexuality. It was about gender. It was about the way we identify ourselves as male or female.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it became really interesting. And then it became kind of film I really wanted to make.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? The way that can happen. You can actually wake up with a solution to your problem sometimes without even realizing some subconscious is working away on your behalf.
Yeah, I know.
So you had all that. I mean, the Oscars and prizes, I'm not particularly, I mean, do they mean a lot to you, or is it here and there?
Oscars?
Well, prizes generally. I mean...
Yeah, of course. It means a lot to you, doesn't it?
Not really.
You had a big party when you were nominated for the Booker Prize, didn't you? I remember the invitation in Filthy McNasties. I remember.
Okay, the fair cop.
Okay, sorry.
Well, anyway, it kind of brings us to that, because what I met you for is this butcher boy business. We spoke about the book. An interview with the vampire was so well received that you were in a position in Hollywood. They said to you, "What are you doing next?" Isn't that right? And you said, "Well, we're going to make a movie about Mrs. Nugent getting chopped up." And they said, "Oh, really? That sounds great." And you said, "But you wouldn't want to do it."
No, well, I did Michael Collins first.
Oh, you did Michael Collins first.
Right.
That's right.
See, the strange thing is, Interview with the Vampire, it wasn't that well received when it came out. A lot of the critics didn't like it.
Was it not?
No. But it was successful. It was commercially successful, and it was particularly in Britain and Ireland, the critics didn't take to it at all. But subsequently, it's turned out to be this kind of, epic movie that everybody loves. But that's the weird thing about films and about popular culture, is the reception that they get when they come out is never the end of the story. You know what I mean? And it's, in fact, in many ways, the least interesting bit of the story.
It's so true. I was reading the reviews of Vertigo when it was voted #1 there. Yeah. And the reviews when it came out were bloody awful.
I know. And
now it's the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. That's really,
it's a very challenging film, isn't it, Vertigo?
Oh, it's astounding. Because over and over again you can watch it.
I know. And anything that does challenge kind of presumptions form, it often has a rough ride,
That's right. I mean, I can't imagine what Pinter's first play how it must have been received when it's something so new and strange.
I know. Yeah.
And it resonates.
I read the first reviews are Waiting for Godot.
Yeah.
People were outraged, weren't they?
Yes, right.
But anyway, I was in the strange position. So myself and Stephen Woolley had made Interview with the Vampire, and it was this big, splashy Hollywood movie, and Warner Brothers basically said, "We want to keep working with you." Yeah. They said, "What do you want to do next?" And so I said, "Can we do Michael Collins?" Because they own that script. I'd been commissioned it years ago. So they said, eventually, if you can make it for a certain figure, we'll make it. Yeah. But it was about $30 million. So we were able to make Michael Collins, and everybody knows, I suppose, the story of that, because it was all over. Ah, Jesus.
Yeah.
I know it's big. But it was all over. It became a big public event in Ireland. Yeah. And it was quite successful for Warner Brothers as well in the end.
Was it? Yeah.
It was, I think. Yeah. Because it played all over the world, and it didn't do too bad in America.
Yeah.
And then they said, "What else do you want to do?" And I bought the rights to the Butcher Boy, and I met you for the first time. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. I met this strange man, Pat McCabe. I remember calling Caroline Walsh, because I read the novel and I thought it was extraordinary, and I called up Caroline Walsh in the Irish Times. I said, "Do you know how to get in touch with Patrick McCabe?" Because all I could see was this photograph of a guy who looked like he was from some kind of gun freak outfit in the Midwest, wearing dark glasses with a combat jacket or something. And she says, "Oh yes, I'll get Pat to call you or something." And Pat, you came out to the house, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah. And we went around to the little Vico bathing place, and I went for a swim, and he's standing in the shade,
Terrified.
Were you terrified?
Gun freaks.
No. Anyway, so I said, let's try and make it into a film, and it seemed to be unfilmable, didn't it?
Looked that way, yeah.
Yeah. So I got the rights to the book myself, and Pat began to write various versions of the script. This is when I was doing Michael Collins, wasn't it? Yeah, that's right. And so Pat instantly threw his book right out the window and wrote a totally different version of the Fancy Brady story. And I read it and said, what happened to the book? Why did you throw the book out the window? You know? So then he wrote another version of it, and he equally threw both the script and the book out the window. And I said, shall I have a go at it myself? Isn't that the way it
Well, it was
work?
kind of good strategy, because then you wrote the shooting script in 3 days.
No, not really.
No, it wasn't much more.
Okay.
It came out very quick, so
All right,
I just write out old rubbish and give it to you, and then you can do it real quick.
Ah, well.
There's a new...
I took both versions he'd written and I went back to the novel and used a lot of voiceover. Because Pat didn't realise that the voice should be the main element in the story, in the movie, you know. Stephen Ray was clever enough to realise that when he read Playing the Older Francie, that actually the voiceover was the performance, you know. And it was cool using voiceover in that way.
Yeah, but of course, being an ingenue or totally inexperienced, all the books I was reading about screenwriting said, you should try and avoid voiceover as much as you can.
Well, you should if it's saying, and 15 years later I met her again.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
It's like that, you shouldn't. But if it's about, Jesus Christ, I was wandering down the street and there's Mrs. Nugent again. I mean, if it's character, it's different, isn't it?
Ah, yeah,
You know.
that's so.
I mean, Stanley Kubrick was very smart about voiceover.
Well, it actually, the Butcher Boys that worked out was very like Clockwork Orange, wasn't it?
A little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit.
In that it's at an angle to the action.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when we talk about literature and movies, I really loved your movie, The End of the Affair.
Yeah.
And you'd read all of P.G. Wodehouse by the age of 5, presumably. So what did you think of Graham Greene's oeuvre? Were you a fan of Greene's?
Yeah, I'm a great fan.
You know, do you like the thrillers and the entertainments, or are you more drawn to?
Everything, you know.
Yeah.
I like you know, the everything, like Scobie and all that, those books, and the character, and you know, the Whiskey Priest and all that stuff. I love all of Greene. How could you not love Graham Greene? He's such a great writer.
Sure. Well, was there anything in particular that drew you to The End of the Affair?
Yeah, the story, the book, the novel. I think it's the best novel he's written, actually.
Do you?
I do. I thought it was. But I mean, I love everything he's written, you know. And he's an extraordinarily broad, fascinating character. If you think the same man who wrote like The Power and the Glory also wrote The Third Man, you know, from scratch, didn't he?
He also was one of the most extraordinary magical realist stories called Under the Garden, which was written long before you heard of Gabriel Garcia Marquez or anybody, and it's set in the English countryside, and it's one of the strangest stories. So he's got all that going as well.
And he also wrote a biography of that martyr, didn't he? I mean, he's an extraordinary figure, Greene. An extraordinary kind of conflicted figure, isn't he?
Very much so.
Yeah. And must have been very. But also, if you read Our Man in Havana, I mean, that's like one of the most savage comedies you've ever written. You know, where the main character, his daughter, is going out with this, you know, this torturer who has a cigarette case made of human skin. You know. Isn't that Our Man in Havana?
I think so, yeah. I can't remember off the bat, but there's so many strange things, like the Comedians, isn't that one of his? Like with Liz Taylor and Richard Burton in Haiti, Port-au-Prince with the Mau Mau and all that. That's a very strange one.
It wasn't a good movie though, was it?
It's something strangely...
I mean, the good one they made was The Human Factor with Bob Hoskins, wasn't it? And Michael Caine. That was good.
Was The Quiet American his, was it?
Yeah. I would love to make a movie with The Quiet American, but it's, you know...
Chilling story.
It was taken. But anyway, the end of the affair was very simple. It was like...
Yeah.
It was... I could see... I was Columbia owned the rights to the book because a movie had been made with Van Johnson, was it, or something like that, which I never saw actually. And they had the rights to the novel, and I asked them. I said, "Look, I'd love to make a movie out of this book." And a guy called John Calley took over the studio. He was the head of production there, and he loved the book as well. So he asked me to write a screenplay. Yeah. And you know, I went through various hum and haw. I was doing different things, and I hired somebody else to write a version of it. And eventually, John says, "Look, just do it yourself, will you? For God's sake, stop
Yeah.
telling other people to do what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, okay. So I sat, and I had a very clear image of how it should go, because it's a triangular relationship, and how it should be narrated by the idea that a novelist is jealous of life really appealed to me, because when you're writing fiction, you're kind of jealous of anybody who's got the immediate contact with life that you don't have.
Yeah.
In a way, it's hard to explain, but it's like you're both creating a version of life, and you're creating kind of a window or a barrier to the direct experience of it at the same time. Anyway, this guy Bendrix typing away at this affair I found fascinating, and the fact that he always imagined this lover, because everybody always does that, doesn't it? Always somebody who's taken their heart, in a far more vital way than I could ever do. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And he actually finds this lover doesn't exist, and actually it was a version of God or something like that. I just thought, this is great stuff. I'd really love to do that if I can get the script right. So again, I sat down and wrote it quickly, yeah. And I had to change the ending a bit, and people in England give out to me a lot about that, actually. Yeah, because the ending of the Greene book is a series of kind of Deus Ex Machina. The central character, Sarah, she suddenly, Bendrix, when he reads her diary, he runs around to the house and he's told she's dead, And then all these kind of strange miracles happen, and it struck me that the ending wasn't as good as the book promised it to be, so I changed the ending, much to the disgust of the British literary establishment, and I kept her alive a bit longer, and I had both men look after her as she was dying, which I thought led to some rather beautiful scenes between Ray Fiennes and Stephen Ray,
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah.
There was a central character in the end of the affair that wouldn't make any sense to anybody in the contemporary, world, philosophic world. He was a proselytizing rationalist. Do you remember that guy?
No, I do.
Yeah, he used to rant and rave about religion and what the damage it was doing to society in general. And he had a big purple mark on his face. Yeah. And Sarah the central character used to visit him because she wanted to be persuaded that the promise she made when she thought Bendrix was dead, she didn't have to stick to it. So she in other words, he was going to see this guy, almost like a priest McCabe, to persuade her that this religious kind of curse that she had to her need not exist. So I kind of turned that guy into somebody. I turned him into a priest, and I put the little birthmark on the detective Parkis's boy on his face. So I did a few things like that changed the novel a bit. I thought they improved it, but some people didn't agree. But it was Greene's, romantic obsession and his triangular thing. He was great.
Just because that's a literary work and so much literature, and I was just wondering what your views are on literature generally now, or maybe the relationship with between literature and cinema now. I mean, do you think, for example, there might be an argument for the box set replacing the big social realist novel, the kind of Zola of our day, or the Dickens of our day? That there are people, generations coming through universities now, might be more inclined to go to the box set rather than, say, read a trilogy of Mervyn Peake.
Maybe, but I don't think it matters. I don't think there's any relation between literature and cinema.
Well, it's just the fact that you wrote at the end of the affair, and you're drawn to literature so much. You're a literary man yourself.
Only at the end of the affair because it's such a dynamic story. You know what I mean? That's.
Yeah, but in your movies, though, you're constantly harking back to people telling stories about stories.
That's not about. That's more about Brexian. That's more like.
You don't think that's to do with literature?
No, I don't. I think it's to do with storytelling. I mean, movies are storytelling. Cinema or TV box sets are. I mean, the whole thing of the box set in the American cable business is a totally different animal. Having done the Borgias now. Yeah. It's a wonderful tool for a writer-director if they can ever get into that world. If you want to tell a story at that length,
sure,
it's extraordinary.
Could we talk a bit about the Borgias?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, okay.
Because you finished the third season now. It's a massive success on Showtime.
Yeah.
And I know that you'd been working on the film script over various versions, and there was a BBC version of the Borgias, wasn't there, in 1981?
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
But So how did it come about that it stopped being a film script, or that didn't?
Well, it came about very simply. I was sent a script by DreamWorks, and it was a biography. It was kind of a movie about Lucrezia Borgia. Yeah, so it was one of these kind of, see portraits of an apparently empowered women in the dark times of the early Renaissance or something like that. And I read it. It was quite interesting. But I said, look, I'd love to do something on this, but I'd like to do something on the whole family. So they commissioned me to write a script called The Borgias, on the whole family, And I began to research them. Alexander Dumas had written a novel, or kind of a novelistic history of them and stuff like that. And I used that as roughly the basis for the script I wrote, which was called The Borgias, and it was about Rodrigo Borgia, the father. It was about Cesare, his son, Juan, his other son. One was meant to be a cardinal, the other was meant to be a general or a soldier. Lucrezia was in the middle, about Benozza, their mother, and all that sort of stuff. So I wrote this script, and DreamWorks said they didn't want to do it. And I tried to set it up independently several times, and I didn't succeed. And I came back to them after several years. I said, look, would you just look at this again and see, would you want to make it? And they said to me, why don't you try and do it as one of these cable series, And I never thought of that, and I began to look at these cable series.
It never occurred to you?
No, never, no. Never. If it had occurred to me around the time of Michael Collins, it would have made a wonderful cable series, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And you would have been able to satisfy every kind of historical perspective.
It wouldn't have been as much crack though,
Maybe not, but it was... Anyway, so I began to look at these cable series, and the most depressing thing about it was I had to look at the Tudors, which is not the most elevated of them, but I began to look at other ones, and I began to look at, Breaking Bad, and Rome, and there was a wonderful one called Carnival. Do you remember it?
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, pretty great, yeah. And of course I looked at The Wire and all that sort of stuff, And so I wrote the first episode, and I wrote the next episode, and I began to write them, and they, they put it into production, and I directed the first 2 episodes which they made into a 2-hour film. And, the first year went on, and it was interesting, and I was kind of finding my way a little bit, and then when they commissioned the second year, I said, okay, now we know these characters, we can really make it interesting. Then they commissioned the third year, and say, okay, now we can make it Jacobean, Jacobean drama. And that was the template for it, really, in the end, was, like Tis Pity She's a Whore, and
that was
The White
exciting
Devil.
when we got to that stage then.
Yeah, so that's... And it's really interesting format, if you ever get the chance to do it, but it would have to be, I'd have to find a subject and let's do it again that really was as compelling as that, It'll start again in June, I think, on Sky Atlantic. They'll show the 3rd season.
And you cast Jeremy Irons as Pope Alexander, who wasn't...
He didn't look a bit like him,
didn't really look like Jeremy Irons, did he? He was dark and tubby, wasn't he?
He was a tubby, yeah. He was.
So why Jeremy Irons? Was there any particular reason why you cast him?
He's a great actor.
Yeah.
That's why. I said, Jeremy, look, it doesn't matter what you look like. Is it about what you look like?
Yeah.
No, it's about power and religion and manipulation of both, It's about Machiavelli's The Prince, which is one of the most terrifying books ever written, I think.
I didn't know that. I was asking about the Prince. That episode with Cesare Borgia. There's a scene where was it Catherine of Sforza? Is that
Catherine of Sforza? Yeah.
Where Machiavelli advises him to put her into a gold cage lined with ermine and satin, and parade her through the streets and horrendously assault her, so that it'll deliver such terrifying message to his enemies that they'll never lift arms against him. Is that a kind of a precedent for almost like state violence and behaviour?
Well, that's what they did then. It wasn't enough to conquer somebody. You had to publicly humiliate them, and they had to be seen to be conquered. It was a pretty savage world.
Wow.
Yeah. He did put her in a golden cage, and he dragged her from Forlì to Rome.
Yeah, I found that was a great episode. I thought.
Apparently raped her too, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's true.
Well, that was Machiavelli's advice anyway, that he should
Yeah.
do that.
But I mean, frankly speaking, the Borgias is the response of a guy who used to, like me, who used to be an altar boy, you know, an Irish Catholic, you know, who's grown up and seen the true reality of what they used to believe in. You know what I mean? That's why it had such attraction for me. It's almost as if Ian Paisley's kind of, you know, most lurid nightmares were to appear on screen about the Red Whore of Rome and all that, you know. And that's why I took such pleasure in doing it.
Everything you know, in your movie, you are fascinated by politics and religion. Really, it seems to goes through everything you do.
Well, no, what I found fascinating in the Borgia thing was that nobody can exercise power without claiming they have some moral or religious justification.
First,
you know, you look at George Bush when he invades Iraq, he says, God told me to do it. And Tony Blair said the same thing. Whereas if you read Machiavelli, you know, he says human beings act out of self-interest, you know. And it's actually observing the way power works and the way human beings manipulate power without any moral kind of superstructure whatsoever. And nobody's ever written anything as cogent and as clear-sighted since. You know, that was written about 1503 or something.
I was wondering, since you said that, I was just found that one of Eamon de Valera's heroes was Machiavelli. I was wondering maybe it was a time for a movie called Dev.
It would be, yeah.
Well, that's true, you know.
Perhaps. I didn't know that.
That's true, because Cardinal Conway apparently and himself were wearing these capes, and Conway took the wrong cape and he discovered the prince in the inside pocket, and it was horrifying. So here was this holy man, de Valera, who was maybe more like Machiavelli than we think. But that's kind of more or less really all I have to ask you, Neil, until we turn it over to the audience to ask them. We didn't mention Breakfast on Pluto, which was a glorious experience.
Sure.
How do you, I mean, well, I listen to the soundtrack of that now. There's some of it worked so well. Harry Nielsen really worked well, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And
I mean, that was a complicated. Breakfast on Pluto was a movie I made after The Butcher Boy. I don't know if everybody's seen it. And it was a very, if you don't mind me saying, a very slender novel of yours, wasn't it? Yeah? Sorry. No, I didn't. I mean, it wasn't 200 pages.
Crying Game's a bit stupid though, isn't it? Like,
what?
Crying Game's a bit...
No. It was a picaresque...
Man is a woman.
No, come on. No. It was very difficult to get that screenplay into a shape where it was alive, you will admit, because you took a bit, as he took a crack at it, I took a crack at it, and eventually we had to construct this kind of picaresque narrative, you know, which is a bit like Candide or something like that, you know what I mean? But I mean, the movie is quite different from the novel, from the book, isn't it?
It is.
It is, yeah. A bit more glamorous than the book, probably. In a way. Anyway, that was lovely to make.
And in Dreams, I haven't spoken about that one either.
You don't have to. It's okay.
No, but it'd be nice. I'm sure. Well, people have their own favourites, though. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to cover them all. You know, I mean, it is a retrospective.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I presume that you don't have a favourite of your own movies. I mean, I would imagine every writer or author has. You know, they are. Like
well, it tends to be the last obsession you have, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Byzantium, I really do love. You know, I love The Butcher Boy. I love The Affair. I actually like The Brave One. Actually.
Oh, The Brave One is great.
You know, that was. It's a movie I didn't write as well, but it's like.
But like Byzantium now, like is so great. It's like you really are at the height of your powers, you know, with the Borgias now. You know, because cinema being such a strange thing, takes so long to get it. You know, it must be kind of a good feeling that, notwithstanding Dublin bus trying to wipe you off the earth. Like, you know what I mean? That was a bit of a blip, but you know, I mean, it's a great. Kind of period now for your work, I think.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just that cinema is. Everybody talks about the huge crisis movies are in, and the huge crisis cinemas in, and how difficult it is to get people to go to see things and all that. But you know, if you just sit down and you write something that excites you, you know, and that really demands to be there on the screen and stuff like that, you know, it'll get made, and there'll always be people making. At the moment, in American independent movies, you know. There are people making extraordinary films, and they are finding an audience.
Are they?
Like, oh yeah, they are, definitely, yeah. There's a movie I want to see at the moment called The Place Beyond the Pines. I don't know if any have seen that. I haven't, because my leg, I haven't been able to go to.
I've seen that with Ryan Gosling.
With Ryan Gosling, yeah. I mean, but there are directors who are making real personal statements
Yeah.
again. Do you know what I mean? And there's, I mean, cinema is as alive. It's just going through it's becoming something different.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
changing all the
is.
time. Yeah.
That's what Ingmar Bergman said in the 60s. What was it? 70s? Was it? He says, what did he said it? Oh yeah, jazz is kind of. If you look at jazz, he said it's kind of become emptied in somehow. But he says there's always something happening in the cinema, And actually, since my leg's been out, I've been watching a lot of Bergman movies again. And that guy was a movie maker, as well as being this gloomy, personalized Swede. You know what I mean? He really knew how to grab your attention, didn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
And he really knew how to kind of construct a yarn, in the early days, anyway. Anyway, that's all I've got to say.
Well, I'd like to throw it open to the audience now. I'm sure people, it is a retrospective after all, and there's so much material, to draw from. If people would like to ask Neil a question about any of these things, by all means do so now. Do we have microphones or anything, or can we hear everybody?
Well, yeah, I've actually got 2 questions. One for Pat. Is this the last we've seen of the Flat Lake Festival? And then just for Neil, it's kind of thinking about, you worked with Borman, and then I believe Borman worked with Sergio Leone on Fistful of Dynamite, and I'm wondering, is there any lineage, what modern directors do you see? Are you friends with Lenny Abrahamson or any modern, younger directors? That's it.
Okay.
Where are we?
You asked you about the Flat Lake Festival.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I got you. No, it was just... Yeah, the Flat Lake Festival is over because it's just financially not viable. It just I'd end up being personally liable for debts and so on, so we just wrapped it up. But it was a great ride, and it's a good thing to do. Unfortunately, we can't go on with it. So.
And you said John Borman worked on a Fistful of Dynamite, did he?
Yeah, I think he might have just filmed a bit in the bar
in the 1916 ride.
Did he? With James Coburn? Yeah.
Yep.
I saw that the other night, actually.
You busted me bike.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you say John directed that for Sergio Leone, did he?
Just that bit.
Well, he takes out the shotgun, bang. That was interesting. The thing is, do I have any relationship with Irish directors?
Yeah.
The only one I have a relationship with is Jim Sheridan, because he's a friend of mine, and we've grown up together, kind of thing, And I produced John Crowley's first movie, Intermission, But I don't really know the other guys. I don't know Lenny. I think I've met Lenny once or twice. I admire what he does a lot. But I don't know the other guys. And it's like I don't think I've strange feelings about defining something as an Irish cinema. Do you understand what I mean? I think it's a bit too late in the development of the whole medium to want to be defining yourself in that way. And I think also that I don't want to get into trouble, okay? I do think that I think it should be more a writer's cinema in Ireland. That's what I think, really. I think the huge strength of the Irish imagination is always the writing, always. And I know that there's many great talents coming out, and but I'm not sure it's the most kind of rewarding thing to define what's been going on over the last few years in Irish cinema. Because I think there's many different talents that will exist on a world stage in a way, And I think that's what movies should be, really. They should be saying to the whole world, come and look at me, I suppose in a way there's no specific style. If you think of the entire development of Hong Kong movies in the 80s and 90s, you could see a visual imprint, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
From even John Woo's work and all that neon stuff, and there's something in common with that and the kind of rather more refined work of Wong Kar-wai, for example.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But I don't think that kind of sensibility has emerged in Irish cinema yet. Is that fair enough to say? Thank you. Okay.
I just meant to ask you, I noticed in the Borgias, David Leland has written quite a few of those episodes.
Yeah.
And he was your writing partner on Mona Lisa, which we haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
Mona Lisa was a lovely film.
Thank you. Thanks,
And
man.
how was your relationship with him, or how did he come from?
Well, again, he wrote the first draft of the script because I was busy doing the Company Wolves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like one of those things you read it and you say, oh, no, that's not, it should be, come on, we can do something different, you know, that kind of thing. A little bit. David wrote something very savage and very, very hard-bitten and, you know, quite violent. And I wanted something much more that was about the way men misunderstand women, you know, so I kind of take it over and do a version of it myself.
Where did the song come from? Was that the starting point, or was that later on?
No, the song came from the basic idea. This guy comes out of prison and he's an obsession, you know, he's got Nat King Cole playing in his head.
Okay,
yeah.
So it started from the song.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about casting characters in your film?
Well, it's the most difficult thing to do, or it's the most important thing to get right. You know, I mean, if you cast a film well, as a director, you've got very little to do. You know, I mean, you see, that's the honest God truth, really. You know, and if you cast it wrongly, man, you have to work hard. You know, it's like, I mean, that's like little Francie Brady. Eamon Owens made that film, you know, and he seemed to be the only person in the universe who could actually even come close to playing the role, you know. And with regard to Byzantium, Saoirse and Gemma, you know, they were so dynamic in their different ways that they made the movie happen. I had to do very little, really, you know. You just construct the images or the world they perform in, you know. But what's difficult about independent movies nowadays is that generally they can only be made if you cast a big star, you know, that kind of thing. And it's generally a guy, so somebody like Colin Farrell or Michael Fassbender or Ryan Gosling or, you know, Johnny Depp, or there's directors all over the world chasing these 10 or so names, you know, to get their movies financed.
Pressurized into casting
Inappropriately,
stars?
all the time, yeah, all the time. I made a rule for myself on Byzantium. I said, there's two rules I'm going to make. If I can't find the right place to shoot the film in, I won't make it. And if they force me to accept somebody who's if they want me to cast, you know, somebody inappropriately, I won't make it either. So, you know, it's casting is the most important thing, really. I mean, sometimes big stars are amazing and they're great, you know, as long as they're the right big stars, you know.
So as an editor myself, how do you approach the editing process? Do you let the editor go ahead and do their thing, maybe with notes or some input from you initially? Or do you like to be present for the cut, or would you just kind of drop in and refine things as you get towards the end? Or does it depend on the film? Are there some films that you'd like to be there for the edit and others that you come in late to the process?
Oh no, you won't keep me out of the edit for the film, no. It's too much fun, you know. I mean, I've worked with the same editor since I did Michael Collins, Tony Lawson, and you know, we've achieved a shorthand because we've done so many movies together now. He's edited most of the Borgias as well, or he's been supervising editor in that. But it's the most fun you'll get in the whole process. You know, is sitting in the cutting room, isn't it? And putting together the music, and you know, seeing how the film should shape and the sounds should, and you know, it's I get annoyingly involved in the editing, I would say.
Your family seems to have a bumper deal on the talent genes. I wonder, does your work influence your sister, your painter sister? Does your sister's work influence you at all? Both on the visual side of creation.
No, not at all. Is my sister here? I had that. She's up there. No, I would say no. I would say so because I admire her work tremendously, and I bought some of it too, you know. But I don't think there's any real cross-fertilization, except I wish I could draw, and I can't. I'd say. Well, our mother was a painter, you know, and our greatest ambitions were for all our kids to paint, you know, and Effin is the only one of us who ended up doing that.
Hello, Neil.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hi. Do you have any opinion on 3D in the cinema? Is it the studio's trying to add value, or is it long term?
Well, I think 3D is very well described, you know. I mean, it literally is 3D. There's a flat background thing of no depth whatsoever. There's kind of a mid-ground where all sorts of annoying things happen, and then there's somewhere near your face where things keep being poked at you. I personally hate it. I can't stand it. And I mean, I think, you know, the sensitivity to which they brought, you know, negative film was extraordinary, and that it's the most extraordinary depiction of, you know, a multi-dimensional reality, the ordinary cinema screen. And 3D seems like going back to some kind of theatrical fairground thing. I don't like it. I like Jim Cameron's movie, but I've not seen anything else that I've been even able to sit through. I tried to watch Martin Scorsese's thing. What was it called? Hugo, yeah. Oh, any architectural kind of reality just vanished, you know. When I saw that kid flying through that clock and all that sort of stuff, it's like there's no sense of any plastic or any tangible environment that seemed to be even being photographed. Anyway, I don't like 3D. Sorry. Okay.
What would be your favourite film from your childhood days?
Oh my God, Jeepers Creepers. That's a tough one. I don't actually know. That's the truth. I mean, the first time I became aware of movies as something different from pure entertainment was with the Sergio Leone films. You know, Fistful of Dollars and Fistful of Dynamite. And, you know, for a few dollars more. I don't know why that was. I must have been around 13 or 14, and you know, it was probably something to do with the music as well. You know. But through those movies I became aware that whole cinema is something other than just, you know, escapism on a Saturday afternoon, you know. And then when I came to, I mean, I suppose, you know, the movies that blew me away would have been, you know, by Fellini and by Kurosawa and, you know, by the great directors.
I have a question. I'd like for both of you to talk a little bit about your writing process. Do you start with an outline? Do you start with a scene and you just keep going? I'd also like to know, Neil, do you change much stuff when you're actually shooting the film? Do you change the script, or is it locked at that stage?
Oh God. It's hard to describe. I start with an idea. It's some kind of idea, an image generally, you know, and I try to see, does it make any sense, and has it anywhere to go? I mean, the easiest thing to do when you're writing something is to begin something, you know, but the most difficult thing to do is to see will it endure through, you know, beyond a kind of a 3 or 4 page scene, you know, and I generally have these images that I don't know where they should go or where they will go, and often they're probably robbed from other things I've seen and not aware of them, you know. But when I do write something, I write it very quickly, you know. So I'm kind of tend to worry with images and ideas for quite a while and not do it, and then suddenly sit down and write them in about a week or so, you know. In terms of movies, that is, you know, and.
Do you set a schedule for yourself?
No. Just I don't know what else to do with myself, so I just write all the time generally.
Well, I'll add to that as well. You know, when Neil was saying that I wrote these 2 drafts or 3 drafts or whatever it was of The Butcher Boy, and he wrote the proper one, the shooting one. But I did do a little bit of studying then, subsequent to that, to see what I was doing wrong. And I came across this quote from Tom McGuane, the American writer. He said that after you've written screenplays for a while, you're not as willing to leave these warm-ups in here, these pencil sharpenings and refillings of whiskey glasses and all those sorts of trivialities. You're more conscious of dead time. That is to say, 20 mediocre pages can hardly hurt a novel, but 10 dead minutes and the movie or play can be sunk. And I learned that. Remember, I had a play called Loco County Lonesome, and everybody kind of, the audience practically lynched the cast or throwing things off in the air because there was loads of dead time in it. And you know, there's only one way to find that out, is just have a turkey, and then you realise you better shape up, because if the audience gets ahead of you, they're savage. They really are. Is that your experience? Once they know the end of the thing, or they can see it?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But then again, you shouldn't be afraid of taking time, you know? I mean, you should at certain points you should be able to say to the audience, "Hang on, you're going to enjoy this, and you're going to take some time over this, and you're going to think over it." You know, I mean, I'd say the best. It's interesting watching, because my leg's broken, okay, or it's not, my knees actually shattered. You know, CIA, do something. But I've been watching. I got out some Jean-Pierre Melville movies, yeah. And I began to get out some Jean-Luc Godard movies that I'd seen years ago, you know, that I thought were good and affected me. And it was interesting to see how annoying Godard is at the moment, with with the gap of 20 years, or the kind of knowingness of whatever. But Melville is a genius, and he's a genius of construction. Does everybody know Jean-Pierre Melville? He made Les Flics and the Cercle Rouge and Bob Le Flambeur and the Samurai, and he was a Parisian dude who was obsessed with American film noir, basically. Have you ever seen Le Flic, Pat? Have you?
No.
Whoa, God, it's amazing, just incredible. And you see these situations are set up with such precision and such kind of cruelty in a way, And anybody who wants to write for the cinema, I think they should study the construction of the basic crime drama, or the dime novel. And I think you could start with Jean-Pierre Melville, and you'd learn an enormous amount from everything he's done,
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I grew up abroad, so I came back to Ireland kind of as a foreigner, seeing Irish culture from an outside perspective. And one thing that always struck me was the rich Irish mythology that we have. And it's always seemed strange to me that it hasn't been brought to cinema more. I mean, I believe you were exploring that with Ondine to an extent, but I've heard rumours that Michael Fassbender and his production company are trying to get a colour movie.
Yeah, I've read about that as well. And there's the graphic novel and things like that are starting to mine that whole culture. I think it's beginning now. I think it's definitely, with Pan's Labyrinth kind of world is starting to there's a generation coming through that are very interested in it now.
Absolutely.
I think it will happen.
So I was just curious, I suppose, if you had any other projects in mind, or if there's any particular reason why you think it hasn't been explored up until this point.
Well, I asked Pat McCabe to do a version of The Changeling, didn't I?
You did?
And he said, no, that's a stupid idea. I mean, I don't know. I would love, I made Ondine, it was like kind of a selkie, mermaidy, legendy thing. I would have loved to do 2 more movies that were about versions of Irish legends. You understand what I mean? Or that were Irish legends in disguise. But I haven't been able to find them as yet, But I mean, you have to look at W.B. Yeats. I know his early work was incredibly sentimental and all that, but nobody trawled through the Irish legendary landscape like he did. The Wanderings of Oisin and stuff like that, and these kind of verse plays that he wrote. And I mean, I don't know why they haven't appeared in movies more. Just because there haven't been movies here, and the kind of movies that did. Pardon?
They're as boring as hell.
What?
Oh, they are not boring.
Well,
Unless you make them, maybe.
Well, I mean, they weren't boring at the time, And anyway, but there's it needs an enormous amount of money to make a proper animated movie. Do you understand what I mean? It's probably beyond the resources of the Irish film industry at present, but maybe that's the reason why they haven't been made.
Well, Patrick Bergin did a triptych of W.B. Yeats. He did The Countess Kathleen and Purgatory, and they, it's just whether they didn't get distribution, but they weren't boring. I know.
I mean, Purgatory is one of the most amazing plays ever written.
It is, it is. It's only about 7 or 8 pages long.
It's terrifying, actually.
Yeah.
Hello, Neil and Pat. I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to do this today. And my question for you, Neil, is that since the death of Roger Ebert, who Werner Herzog said was one of the last soldiers of cinema, where do you feel that film criticism is going to go in the near future and in regards to professional film criticism?
Okay. Roger Ebert. Did you ever meet him?
No.
No. Okay. He apparently had his first sexual experience in Sligo. He told me. I swear to God, it was in this romantic way that Irish Americans talk about Mary Jane O'Hara under the or whatever by the ditch or something. Anyway, Roger Ebert, at the time when he came out, Siskel and Ebert came out, they were regarded as the death of criticism in the United States. This was around the time of Pauline Kael and who's the guy who used to write for the Village Voice? You know, during the great day, the heady days of American kind of new way of criticism, when Siskel and Ebert were doing their thumbs up and thumbs down stuff, people regarded it as kind of as cheapening of a grand tradition kind of thing. But Roger he loved movies, he really loved them. And you know, not only did he do the TV show thing as well, but the Chicago Sun-Times he used to write, was it?
Yeah, it was the Chicago Sun, I think.
This is Chicago what, sorry?
Chicago Sun, I believe, was the paper.
Yeah, that's right. He loved movies, and he took time to describe them beautifully and stuff like that. He was pretty great. I mean, film criticism seems to have been refracted through the web or something, doesn't it, in some weird way, doesn't it? There's all these blogs and some of them are quite well written. I mean, the thing that I judge critics, yeah, not by their taste in movies, but by how badly they write or how well they write. No, seriously. And some of the most self-satisfied and smug critics are the worst fucking writers you would ever come across, you know? They say things like thrillingly, you know, and mind-numbingly. I mean, what's wrong with thrilling and mind-numbing, you know? Or, you know, it's like, I mean, some of them are dreadful writers, aren't they? And particularly they use bad verbs and stuff. Anyway, but Roger was a good writer, yeah? And he wrote really well about it, as does Philip French, write really well about cinema. And anyway, he got a very bad cancer, didn't he? Yeah.
Pat, could I ask you, could we see the Butcher Boy grow up? Would it be a possibility? And then could we see maybe that film being made? It is my favourite.
You mean like a sequel?
Mm.
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
I just don't think I'd be capable of doing it. You know, when it's finished.
Think about it.
Sorry, what was that? What was that? Sorry, I didn't get that. Just think. Oh, sorry, yeah. No, I'm not really in control of these things. If it ever happened, I'd love to do it, but I can't really. It's kind of finished for me. It's been very good to me, mind you, but it's kind of over.
Hi there. I'm just wondering, do you have a limit on the Borgias for the number of seasons?
Yeah,
and also, very quickly, looking back, is there like a recurring theme that pops out of your movies when you look back?
Okay, the Borgias is finished. Okay, the chap who took over Showtime, you know, it's kind of one of those Hollywood situations where the new heads of production have their own favorite things they want to develop, you know, and I wasn't sure there were 10 episodes left in it, so I proposed to them that we do a 2-hour, you know, movie to finish it off, and they found it too expensive. So there will be, after season 3, there will be no more Borgias. Okay, that's one thing. And sorry, what was the other question?
When you look back at your work,
do you see
any recurring themes kind of popping up?
I don't know. Somebody else would have to answer that question. You know, I mean, I see somebody who's not that comfortable with reality, basically. When I look back at all the movies I've made, who keep wanting to escape into invented realities of various kinds, you know. But that's the only thread I can think of.
Okay. I think that about right there.
Could I just ask a quick question about sound? You mentioned it a few times, how important sound was to you, you know, and how much involvement have you in the soundtracks of the movies? Or you mentioned in the editing there how involved you were, you know?
Yeah. You mean in the music tracks or the sound in general?
Well, yeah, both the sound and the music tracks.
Yeah,
they're very important. Like,
of course they are. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think music is used too much in movies now. If you ever look at Dog Day Afternoon, you know, the Al Pacino movie, there's not one piece of music from start to finish of that whole film, and it is so refreshing, you know, because you experience reality in a different way. You know, music by its nature manipulates you, I think, for good or for ill. You know, it tells you what to feel, And if it's not there, often you have to, the film itself has to tell you what to feel. Yeah, so sound is incredibly important, but I generally work at that with the editor, Tony Lawson. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming along. If there's no further questions, yeah. Are we done? Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. No.
Oh, there was a microphone there.
All right.
I just wanted to ask both of you, do your ideas find you or do you find them?
You answered that. Very well expressed.
That's very true. It's a great question. And the thing is, there's a couple of different viewpoints in this. Like Richard Ford, the American actor, has always said, there's no question of my characters get up and have, their own autonomous life. All my characters are galley slaves. In other words, that he controls everything. But I'm quite the opposite. I often go to bed. Actually, better expressed by Patrick Kavanagh one time in the 1950s, sitting in McDade's bar, of course. And someone said, "You look particularly more cranky today than usual, Patrick. What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I have 4 bastards in the corner of a field and I don't know how to get them out of it." and he said, "But I often find that with the putative 4 people in the corner, I often go to sleep and wake up with the solution." So a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff is going on in your subconscious, and the ideas generally do find me, for good or ill. I don't know if that's true of Neil, maybe a bit of both.
No, I don't think you're in control of what you do, really. That's why it's so difficult. That's why it's so easy to write the beginning.
Oh yeah, you can't.
I don't think it's just you're waiting for the stuff to tell you what it wants to do, And I suppose if it's any good, if you force things. Who was it said that? What was it? Plot is what the author wants the characters to do. Story is what the characters want to do.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's.
Hello, sorry, I just have one quick question. Thanks a million for that really interesting conversation. It's a pleasure to be here to hear it. And I'm just wondering, are you working on anything at the moment? And also, having finished a wonderful film of Byzantium, do you like to just take a bit of a period of time to just reflect and get your thoughts together before you begin work on another project?
No, I hate to take a period of time to reflect, but I have to because I've been hit by a bloody bus. And it's had one extraordinary effect to me is I don't want to make another movie in Ireland for a while. So I've written a ghost story which I want to make, which is, I think, could be interesting,
Well, it took CE to slow Neil Jordan down, but let's give him a big round.